right. Shout out to Liz. So calm down. It says, for example, 2, the rent charge for space in an office building is a linear relationship related to the size of the space rented. Write an equation of the slope-intercept form for the rent at the West Main Street office rentals. And so we're just going to kind of go through this, and then we'll have some questions at the end. So step 1 is always identify the input and output variables. So on our first example, we talked about input and output. What was our input? What were we plugging in on that very first example?
In the very first one, spend rent. Wait.
It's the x-axis. Always the independent or the input is always the x-axis. It was the number of DVD rentals, right? So remember, input is always our x value, right? And output is always our y value, okay? So when you look at a graph, whatever they label on the x-axis, that's what we're inputting into the function, okay? The output is the answer we get, right? So if you look at this equation every time we have x, we're going to plug in a number for x. We do a bunch of math, and it cranks out a y value. The y value is the output. The x parameter is the input, right? So on that last example that we did, we're trying to figure out our total monthly bill for DVD rentals based on the number of DVDs that we rented, right? So the input is the number of DVDs, and then we crank through the math and it tells us our total bill, okay? So then the input variable on this particular one, the input variable on this one is going to be the square footage, because it says it's based on the square footage. So if I have, and just think about this out loud, if I have a larger square footage, I'm going to pay more rent. So the input, the thing that's going to vary, that I'm going to plug in, is going to be the square footage. And what does y represent? The cost, right? So then the output is the monthly rent, right? So then it says, write some ordered pairs. So what they do is they give us some information. This is an x value. This is an x value. This is a y value. This is a y value. So if I label this x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2, in other words, x sub 2 equals 600, or I'm sorry, x sub 1 equals 600, y sub 1 equals 750. So step 2 is write the information given in the form of ordered pairs. So for 600 feet, the rent is 750. So this is like x sub 1, y sub 1. And then the rent for 900 square feet is 1150. So this is x sub 2, y sub 2. And so we find the slope by plugging it into the slope formula. And so 1150 minus 750 is 400. 900 minus 600 is 400 over 300. That reduces down to 4/3. Now, the only problem is, remember to write something in y equals mx plus b. We know what m is. Do we know what b is? Yeah, so we got to figure out what b is. So how do I figure out what b is? Well, I'm going to take a variable. I'm going to take my x sub 1, y sub 1, and I'm going to plug it into this equation along with the slope. Notice that I have a number here, a number here, a number here, and b. So now, because you could use either x, y. You could use x sub 1, y sub 1, or you could use x sub 2, y sub 2. The answer will be the same. So we're going to plug that in and solve for b. 4 times 600 is what?
2400.
2400 divided by 3 is?
800.
There it is. Boom. And then we got 750 over here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 800 from both sides. That's what we do, right? We're just solving the equation. 750 minus 800 is a negative 50, and then I have b over here. So and I'm subtracting 800 here. These cancel, and I get negative 50. So then I rewrite the equation with the slope and b. All right, so that wasn't too hard. Let's try to do some of the stuff on our own. So it says, Harry's weekly allowance varies depending on the number of chores he does. So right now, what varies it is the number of chores. So we're going to say x equals the number of chores. If he does more chores, he makes more money, right? And Y is dead presidents, chips, Skrilla, cash.
Oh.
Anyways, so Y represents how much money he makes. So he receives a $16. He received $16 in allowance the week he did 12 chores. So that's 12 comma 16, right? And we'll call this X sub 1, Y sub 1. And then he received $14 when he did 8 chores. So that's going to be 8 comma 14. And that's X sub 2, Y sub 2. And it says we got to figure out the slope-intercept form. So to do that, I got to figure out the slope. M is equal to Y sub 2 minus Y sub 1 all over X sub 2 minus X sub 1. Y sub 2 is 14 minus Y sub 1, which is 16, all over X sub 2, which is 8, minus X sub 1, which is 12. Now, when you do the math on this, you get negative 2 over negative 4, correct? Now, the negatives cancel, right? Because when you take a negative and divide it by a negative, it becomes positive. What does 2 over 4 reduce to? 1/2. Now, the only other part is I got to solve for B. So that's the slope. But to solve for B, I'm going to say, I'm going to start with Y equals mx plus B. And then I'm going to plug in a Y value. So I'm going to choose this stuff here. My Y value is 16. My slope is 1/2 times X. In this particular case, it's going to be 12 plus B. What's 1/2 of 12? 6. So 16 equals 6 plus B. What do I do to get B by itself?
You have to do the 1605. Or is it 1605?
Well, I want to move the 6 away because I want to get the B by itself. So to move the 6 away, what is the 6 doing to the B on this side of the equation? It's being added. So we do the inverse. Yep, good. So we would subtract whatever I do on one side of the equal sign I do on the other. And then we get, and you could think about that. What plus 6 gives you 16? 10, right? But we want to learn how to solve equations. So B equals 10. So then my y-intercept form would be Y equals my slope, which is 1/2, times X, and plus 10, because that's a positive 10. And that's it. See how we did that? It would be